What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Gary G. Monterey. What's popping with you, bro? I see you got your aces. Are they about to do this thing again, bro?
What up with it, bro? Hey, man, let me tell you. First of all, I want to start this off by saying, goddamn, Fee. Goddamn, Fee. Bravo. I just gotta start there. If you know, you know, Fee, you got it. That's some big talk. Shout out to the.
Could you imagine if LeBron came out and said that about
bro? What? Man, I don't think people understand just how big. Like that is big time stuff. But yeah, man, the Aces are up 2-0 in the finals. First ever time the W finals have gone to 7 games. And my Aces, if you know, I'm a big Asia Wilson fan. I've been loving Asia Wilson for years now. I've been obviously saying that she has been the best player ever for a while now. And so to see her on the cusp of history, greatness again, I'm going to be out in Vegas this weekend. And maybe, just maybe, if they win game 3, game 4 is Friday, maybe I'll be in Vegas for when they win it in Phoenix. But Phoenix is a tough team, man. So the Mercury are tough, but it is going down. And my Aces are up 2-0. Shout out to Jackie Young. Shout out to Dana Evans, Chelsea Gray, all of them. They are hooping. That's all. But also, man, let me tell you something. It has been the weekend has been crazy for the city. There was the Fried Chicken Fest this weekend. There was the Gretna Fest this weekend. And I actually went not downtown, but I live around the downtown area. And I saw a lot of Pelicans gear, man, around the first quarter fest and everything. And I think it goes to show, like, the city has a little bit of buzz going for the team. And so, to see those guys, go over to Australia and represent the city well. And by all accounts, everybody talked about, there was this like montage before the second game, and they were talking about how, from the locals there, they were talking about how New Orleans has been represented by the Pelicans so well, and that people now want to come to New Orleans to see the Pelicans play. So, it's always good when the city gets good news, positive news out there, because it's very hard nowadays to find any positive news worldwide, let alone in the city of New Orleans. So it was pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see, the city kind of getting some buzz as the NBA season going on. But the Pels went over to Australia, man, and I know they suffer from some jet lag. I'm not. I'm ready to talk about the preseason game, so let's get to it. How's everything on your side?
Everything's blessed. You're absolutely right. I mean, look, let's just call a spade a spade. The shout out to Lil Cuz, Spencer Rattler, got his first win as an NFL quarterback, and Kellen Moore got his first win as a. But like, I've been saying it for a couple of years now. When you go through the fest and you go through Mardi Gras, you're starting to see more Pelicans jerseys than Saints jersey. And like, that's a crazy thing to say. Like, if you don't know the city, that's an insane thing to say. And again, based off what you saw shortly, and we'll jump into it, there's a lot of excitement around the Pelicans and like the Saints. Well, maybe not so much. But before we get into the things, make sure you guys are following us. That's on X, that's on Twitter, that's on IG, that's on TikTok. That's NO_basketball, no E. Make sure you are liking the episode below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. So yeah, let's talk about Australia. So first off, shout out to Lyle Swizzy Bank, who was basically like the tour guide for all of New Orleans while this
I call him the Aussie aficionado.
of all of this historic event that's going down, the Pelicans play the first ever NBA games in Australia with a NBA court. They don't play against another NBA team and things like that. But to your point, like, I think we need to take a second here there. Garrett, there was every single seat in the house was packed, and not like packed with like, because sometimes what bothers me when you go to a sporting event, you go to a Pelicans versus Lakers game and there's like a Timberwolves jersey and there's like a random Suns jersey. And so like, I expect a lot of the international friendlies to be looking like that. But like, you looked at the stadium and everybody had Pelicans gear in the middle of Melbourne, Australia. And first of all, I thought that was insane. That was also just an awesome sight to see. And I think the players were a little taken back about it because they kind of talked about their experience. Like, we didn't expect this type of embracement, but it seems like the Pelicans have a pocket of fans in Australia. So shout out to them for that. But the whole experience, I think, was really cool for the NBA. You know, obviously basketball is growing exponentially as a sport across the planet. All you need is a ball and a hoop. And so it's easy to pick up no matter what size or where you live and things like that. And I think the NBA is just diving into that, playing more and more international games. But from the experience together, the crowd together, I know the NBA's talked about potentially having like a NBA Europe and things like that. Like, I just see the sport growing from there. Were there any things that kind of stood out for me just from the events, the skills challenge, the whole Australian spectacle with the Pelicans?
Yeah, I think a lot of the Australian, fan base, and obviously I'm not out there. I would just venture to guess, came from the Pelicans drafting Dyson Daniels, right? And you saw them take on his little brother, and there was a little bit of something there. And so I think, there was the beginnings of that, right? Dyson Daniels being one of the talents coming into the NBA. And has obviously made himself a great career even after the Pelicans traded him away. But I think that's where it kind of began. But I think, again, like we talked about, I think the game of basketball is just something that people love. And they were ready for the Pelicans to come. They had already been psyching themselves up and, having the NBA. You could just hear the way, the people at the NBL league talked about the NBA, right? Like we take the NBA for granted. You just turn on the game and it's whatever. A lot of people not even watching preseason games right now, but the way they talked about it, it was like this sacred thing. Like they were amped up and hyped about it. And I think that just goes to show you the power of the NBA and these NBA stars who play without any, pads on or any helmets. Like you see their faces, the same faces that are on commercials, the same commercials who are on streaming platforms and on social media and things. So it was just cool to see, that kind of dynamic grow. And listen, if there's a team who, is on the ground floor of this, kind of trying to be, a good team and get in the basketball conversation, it's like we saw the Pacers do, like we saw OKC has come around and done, right? And we've seen other younger teams kind of sprout out. Anthony Edwards has taken the league by storm. This is the team that you would want to have, with the ground floor, with Zion being kind of this forgotten, sleeping giant of a superstar, especially with the lack of American players around. I think that is a good look for Zion to have gone out there and done what he did. And I tell you one thing that stood out for me. You say it was crazy to see Pelicans fans and Pelicans jerseys and signs and stuff. I agree with that. As a person living in New Orleans, as a local, I've been here my entire life. To hear "Get You Some" in Australia, I want you to understand just how wild that was. So I think that it seared into my brain that write me down fewer times, but they always play "Get You Some" just to hear a New Orleans bounce staple, something that was homegrown here in New Orleans that has some meanings to it that I don't know if the basketball team, whatever.
Don't worry about all that.
Yeah, don't worry about that. To hear it playing in Australia and they see like the Pelicans understand it, like, hey, like this is our song, this is what we know, and like to get it started, I think that was pretty awesome too.
Yeah, it was a good experience all around. I think the NBA knows what they're doing from that standpoint. I want to transition into the fans that you saw and what we just talked about in Melbourne and, the spectacle they put on. First of all, it didn't feel like a friendly matchup. Like it felt like these teams were trying to win. They were trying to compete and show that, they strap them up too.
I mean, the NBL teams are looking to state claims. They got some guys who trying to get into the NBA. And look, it's preseason, but like you don't want to be an NBA team that gets on everybody turn on SportsCenter and they like the Pelicans lost. They don't care if Zion played. They don't care if Trey Murphy don't play. They just say, wait, the Pelicans lost to who? You don't want to be that team. So that's why you get that competition going.
Right. And Zion alluded to that himself. The first game got a little close and they had already kind of pulled most of the starters. And Zion's like, wait, should we go back in just to make show? Because that's just what the Pelicans need. Another negative rumor about them losing in the preseason, even though the Suns did it a couple years ago and stuff like that. But interesting, media day happened for the Pelicans last week before they went to Australia. This week, a lot of media days have taken place and now preseason started. There was a former Pelican that decided that he had some words in terms of getting off his chest. He went out of his way to allude to the fact that Brandon Ingram being in Toronto, they asked him what's the biggest difference or change that he's seen. And the first thing he said was the fact that the arena is packed, win or loss. Now, he made it's I felt like there was a way he could have gone about that to both, keep his relationship with, his former teammates and former fans, but also kind of state what he had to say and bring some love to him, Toronto. But he didn't do that, Garrett. He just came out and said, in New Orleans, it wasn't like this. And this is different, even though he's played 0 minutes for the Toronto Raptors so far. What were your thoughts on that? Because I think just from the play and what you've heard from the team, and we documented so far that like this team has a lot of people who are looking to have something to prove and looking to showcase that early and often in the season. I took this as this locker room was really close with Brandon Ingram, but I think that's the thing where you might proverbial hang it on the clipboard and say that's what they're talking about your fans, what you're going to do about it. What were your thoughts on BI's comments? Do you think it's a brush off the shoulder? He's just trying to gain some love from Toronto? Or do you think there's some bad feelings from a player who got traded?
What we always say, only a Sith deals in absolutes.
True.
And I think, listen, I said it when we, at the media day podcast that we did, media day is just the best day ever for everyone, right? Every single year it's, we're going to be the champions. What about this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy? And it's the players, coming, taking pictures, getting in front of mics and feeling comfortable. You're around all the reporters that all praise you and know you or whatever the case is. And, the record 0-0, nobody's got punched in the mouth yet. Nobody has gotten any injuries. So you start to feel yourself a little bit. And listen, I think there is context behind everything. I'm at every home game. Sure, there are times where the Smoothie King Center is empty. A lot of those times the Smoothie King Center is empty is because the Smoothie King Center doesn't have a full basketball team.
Right.
And a lot of people who are doing a lot of those talking are a lot of that talking is a part of that. And I will, that's just that on that. And so, I think that, for this team who literally has everything in front of them, you have everyone, there've been people putting out their preseason Western Conference rankings, and the Pelicans are 13th on this list and 12th on this list and 14th on this list. This is just another, and whatever you need to do to motivate you, circle the Raptors games. Fine. Everybody talks about what are there's a few return games this season. Miles Turner back to Milwaukee, and you got stuff like that. Like Brandon Ingram return to New Orleans already was going to be a little bit of interesting, but now even more it's going to feel that way because what's the recognition he's going to get, right? Obviously, fans enjoyed his.
Get booed? You think he'll get booed?
I think there will be some people who boo him, but the prevailing sentiment around BI before he left, obviously, there were some stylistic issues, but by all accounts, everybody loved Brandon Ingram, right? Like loved the person he was and what he represented and how he talked about the city and talked about the fans. So there's going to be obviously people who do love him, but I do think like there are some people who took that as like, oh, well, you did, okay, so be it.
Yeah.
And again, if it motivates this team to get off to a hot start, to say, you know what, it was Brandon Ingram, then so be it, right? Who am I to tell you no? But for me, it wasn't a huge deal, only because like people say. I remember when I'm old enough to remember when LeBron got to Miami, it was not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. Everybody say any kind of thing, right? They say anything. And I think, it was just that. But if whatever it takes to motivate this team, I'm all for it. Circle it and put belt to ass if it comes to it.
Right. So That leads me into our point and the main topic on this pod, because I deem the Brandon Ingram and Zion era of Pelicans basketball as the what if era, because literally you went through 4.5, 5 seasons and you got no answers. You never got to see the two best players play together. You never got to see the two best player and the guy you brought in CJ McCollum actually play as the third string. You never got to see some of the pieces you acquired along the way play in their roles. So you never really got any answers at all. And so I just call it the what if answer. I don't know if it ever worked, because Brandon Ingram was going to have to adapt and play more from behind the 3-point line if he was going to work next to Zion and things like that. But all in all, you can't say you know one way or the other. So it's just a big what if from that perspective. But that got me thinking, Garrett. There's a lot of things going on this week. People are getting more and more hype about the NBA. Its return, coming back, preseason games. People are playing all over the world, about to come back and start getting to the grind. A lot of conversations right now are about like the Philadelphia 76ers, and that they've got this 41 win projection total in Vegas. And everyone's like, well, they could win 30 games because you have no idea what's going on with Joel Embiid, and Paul George is already hurt, and McCain's already hurt. They have no idea what's going on. Or if those guys are healthy, they could win 50 games, 60 games. You got a former MVP, Paul George, and things like that. And that got the wheels turning, Garrick, because you and I have been talking a lot about the Pelicans situation, and like you like to deem it, it's very unique. And so it brings the question, are the Pelicans the biggest variance / what if team in the NBA? Because here's where I fall on the Sixers part of that. Obviously, everyone's going to put them as the number one pick. Well, the problem with the Sixers is that their best players are 33, 34, 35, and Joel Embiid is getting up there in age. And even though he's slimmed down and looks like he's in good shape and ready to attack it in whatever form possible, you still are betting that Father Time somehow is not defeated, or is defeated this year in that scenario of them working out. But in the Pelicans scenario, it's not just like, okay, if injuries work out or if this player is better or whatnot. You literally have a talent who objectively across the league, whether you love, hate, despise, can't stand Zion, whatnot, people would say if that guy plays, he's probably one of the 10 best players in the NBA. Like if he plays 82 games unhealthy, looking like this, he probably has that, at least that level of talent. If you don't want to call him a top 10 player, a talent of that source. Then you have a player in Herb Jones who objectively people would say this is one of the better defenders in the NBA, not in his conference, not on his team, but in the NBA. If you put him out there in perimeter defenders. And then objectively, I asked this question to Twitter and to X. Trey Murphy is such an interesting player that everyone seems to love, but everyone seems to forget still plays on the team with Zion and with the Pelicans. And so my question, like with Trey Murphy, is like, if you looked around the NBA, how many teams would Trey Murphy not start on? Like, let's go to the Thunder. Are you sitting Trey Murphy for Alex Caruso?
No.
Right? Okay, let's go to the Pacers. Like, who is taking Trey Murphy's spot to the point where he's coming off the bench? Those are two teams coming. Okay, go to the Nuggets. Like, if you go to some of these teams, even the Rockets, Tari Eason, is he playing over Trey Murphy? And so, like, if you start with the top of the league and you say this is a guy who objectively could start and be a positive starter on every team, if not the majority of teams, and he happens to perfectly fit the skill set of the top 10 talent that you have, what if those two things come together along with the draft picks and all the other things that come along? So talk me off my ledge here, Garrick. If everything goes right or some things go right, is there a bigger, higher variance than the Pelicans in the West?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a bigger, higher variance team in the league. And, I think the Sixers, obviously, because they play in the Eastern Conference, right, could probably maybe if everything went right for them, they could win more games because they play in the Eastern Conference. But I do think the Pelicans are the team that, if you ask a lot of these people, a lot of these lists, pundits, whatever, about, why they have the Pelicans at 14 and 13 and everything, it'll start with Zion's health, which is obviously the one thing that everybody has to see to believe, which is fine. I agree with that. The second thing they say is that they made a crazy trade to trade away the unprotected first round pick. And my response would be, well, unprotected first round picks don't play on the court. And so, that can't be a reason why the Pelicans on the court are not going to be as good because they don't have a pick next season. I don't see how that, correlates. So if you think about this team and you think about what could happen, right? Again, we've seen like the worst of the worst. We just went through it, right? We watched the Pelicans, right? We watched the Pelicans scrounge and claw and fight their way, for 20 wins, and be knocking on the door of the first pick of the draft in November, right? Like we've seen that happen. But we've never seen the best case scenario for the Pelicans, because even when they were at the number 1 seed and Zion was playing at his top, Brandon Ingram wasn't playing, right? And then when the Pelicans made the playoffs and got 2 games on the number 1 seed, well, Zion wasn't playing. So you never got to see that best case scenario. And so you really don't know what the best case scenario for the Pelicans is. However, if you look, we talk up and down the roster. I think a lot of what people talk about, up and down the conference, I think a lot of people, when people talk about the West is deep, I don't think that it's deep, meaning like there's a top and then like 2 through like 9, 10, 11, 12 are not that far apart, right? And so if you were to tell me that the Clipper, right, you talk about the Pelicans and Zion's health, if Zion's health isn't great, okay, fine. But like if Kawhi's health isn't great, the Clippers aren't in the greatest position, right? If the Warriors lose Steph or Jimmy or Draymond at their advanced age for a week or 2, they're not in great shape. Like the Suns aren't in great shape. The Rockets already lost their point guard for the season. They're not in perfect shape. So it's just all of these teams are so bunched up to where if you look and are objectively being honest about it, if you're just saying that the Pelicans are just plastered at 13 and have no chance of being the 4th seed, then that's not a good faith argument. And so I think the Pelicans are the highest variance. I think if Zion plays less than 60 games, the Pelicans could be right back in the situation or scenario, even though I think they're a little bit better off now than they have been in previous iterations. But if we've seen Zion play 65 games before, and if he can play that game and with this team, with now this deep roster around him, I don't see why they couldn't be the 3rd, 4th seed in the West. And so when you think about that big of a variance, I don't really know any other teams that could be at the bottom of the West or be like the 3rd seed or the 4th seed at the top, or maybe knocking on the 2nd seed. So like I think that this team has enough talent. Will it all come together? We'll see. But the variance of it, how good they could be, their ceiling versus their floor, I think is the biggest gap in the NBA.
I tend to agree with that. Again, like to your point, there's a lot of teams bunched together. It's like the Thunders, the Rockets, Nuggets, Wolves. Like those are kind of the established teams that have in the last couple of years built their
Warriors,
teams up and built those teams up to be there. But like, I don't really count the Warriors in that top group just because, like you just said, Draymond, Jimmy, Steph, none of them are under 35. And the thing that, you're starting to hear more players and you're starting to hear some coaches say this too, is that even though the ratings may not have been great and you had 2 small market teams in the NBA finals, I think what you took out of that finals is that the NBA is going to be a hell of a lot more physical. I think more and more you saw it in Summer League. More and more teams are going to be picking up 94 feet, going to be throwing bodies at you in waves. Everyone's going to be playing more than 8 players now, going to be trying to go deeper in their bench and things like that. And I don't know if that helps an older team like the Warriors. I don't know if that helps the Clippers. I don't know if that helps some of these teams that their best players are on the treadmill down. So running and being pressed for 82 games prior to the playoffs altogether, I don't think that helps some of the older teams from that standpoint. So I'm very interested. And then like the other team, the Grizzlies, Mavs, Kings, Suns, like they're all flawed in their own ways too. And so to your point, like I'm just interested to see the ball roll out. I do want to talk about a little bit what we saw from these games in Australia. Now, they weren't playing against an NBA team, but what I will say is like that team, the Melbourne United team, like they were very well coached. They were very crisp when passing. Like we just watched the NBA, or we just watched the USA almost lose in the Olympics. Like other basketball is catching up now. Again, the NBA is the crown, and they even talked about, hey, this is my showcase to get to the NBA. But other guys can play too. And so, like, I watched that game, and I'm not looking at the score. I'm not looking at, because again, none of these guys are going to be lining up when game one starts versus the Grizzlies. I'm just looking at the pace. I'm just looking at the style of play. I'm just trying to look at what's different. What were some of your takeaways from the first two games in Australia, whether it be trends, whether it be people, rotation, coaching, things like that? I see some of the comments off defense and rebounding were some of the concerns. I'm going to address that too, but what were some of the takeaways that kind of stood out to you in the Pels' new era first expression and first impressions?
Well, I think the first thing is, I went into the last couple of seconds of the last podcast that we did, and you asked, what were we looking for in training camp in the preseason? My first question was Wingstop back? Were we able to shop at Wingstop again? And boy, are we! Like, are the Pelicans deep at the wing position? Because again, it's the story is Zion, the story is Trey Murphy, the story is Herb Jones. But where you're going to win a lot of those regular season games to get to that top of the variance that we talked about, it's going to be the middle of your roster on the bench side, right? That wing rotation on the bench side. And man, Micah Peavy, Sadiq Bey, each showed like really key things that they will bring to the team that we talked about coming into the, like, okay, can they show this? And they came out and showed it, right? And so I think just the fact that you have some other NBA players down in those wing positions that you can pull in and be confident that they won't come in and be shell-shocked, that they won't come in and be out-physicaled, outmatched, or outplayed. Sadiq Bey is a pro, and Micah Peavy is going to be a pro's pro. You can see it. From the way he approaches the game, his defensive energy. And I think I saw a little bit in that second game, obviously the Sadiq Bey game, where Zion and Sadiq Bey, they kind of, a lot of what we thought, he and Jordan Hawkins was going to have, where I know where you're going to be. I don't have to worry about if you're like cutting back door. I know what you're hunting. You're hunting those 3-point lines. And, him being able to feel comfortable finding Sadiq Bey in those pockets, I think there's going to be a huge, and Sadiq Bey's ability to knock that 3-ball down is going to pay huge dividends. It's crazy that Sadiq Bey isn't even mentioned in the Jordan Poole trade, until he steps on the floor. He's just kind of, and they got Sadiq Bey, where he's like really a quality depth wing replacement. You've been looking for that Najee replacement. I think this is the kind of guy, and if not better, an upgrade over Najee as far as, the fit for the Pelicans. Another thing is obviously the ball movement. I think it was interesting to see, the Pelicans like push the pace, like every single play, looking to push the pace. And you've seen this in spurts for the Pelicans, but this seemed more intentional, as if like, we're like, this is what we're going to do. And like, we're not going to stop until, someone stops us. And it was intentional after makes, after free throws, after misses, everything. They were pushing the ball up. And I think that is going to help, with also this stable of extra players and this depth that you have. You can throw those guys out all the time in those days. And obviously, these guys, we talked about how good the NBL looked and the Melbourne players looked. They're still not gonna get back as much as like NBA players get back. Right. Those guys, they talk about how athletic that the Pelicans were, and there's a lot of other athletic players in the NBA. And so it's gonna be interesting to see if they can still continue that once the competition gets up. But I love what I saw as far as the pacing of the offense. And last but not least, obviously we'll talk about Zion. That's we can put that to the side. I liked what I saw from the defensive rim protection side, right? obviously there were some blow-bys and things like that, but between Eves and Zion, Eves was making people make business decisions. And I tweeted about it. Shot deterrence is almost as important as shot blocking at the rim. Because if you can start to garner in a reputation where guys are looking at you, looking for you before they make a play at the rim or before they pass the ball or whatever the case is, we talk about how basketball is played in windows. And if you can get a guy to take a half step, a half second extra because where's Eves, where's Zion coming backside, that can allow some of these other perimeter players to get back on defense and things like that. And so I really enjoy seeing, the shot deterrence and blocking, especially after so many years of not having it, just to see Eves and Carlo and Zion get out there and be physical at the rim, and Looney as well. I think that's a really good positive sign for these guys being connected on that back end. And once, your teammates, your wing defenders and your guards start understanding that, hey, I got help behind me. All I need to do is turn them and get back. They'll be able to play more physical because they know somebody's behind them. And so I enjoyed watching the shot deterrence, from some of the big guys. And it was refreshing to see after so many years of not having it. Let's just put it like that. What about you?
I'm going to start with the best word I could use to sum up the just first two games of the Pelicans preseason is natural. It just felt fluid and natural. Like, how many times over the past couple of years were you looking with Brandon Ingram and Zion and, you had DeJounte for a couple games, stuff like Trey, stuff like that, and everything kind of felt like forced or fragmented. Like, hey, we want to play up tempo, but then every 3 possessions, you got to remind someone, push the pace, go. And even after makes, Garrick, Jordan Poole's up the court. Jeremiah Fear's up the court. There was a possession where the offense kind of got stale. And again, I don't expect these guys to iron out. They're just now figuring out their team, and this is their first competitive action versus another team. I think some of that is going to figure itself out, but there were some stale half-court possessions. But then after that, Jose gets in the game, and you see him immediately push the pace, and then everyone starts running too. And so to your point, it feels as if it's intentional, but not just intentional. It's the natural way that this set of players play. We talked about CJ McCollum. We talked about Brandon Ingram. We talked about Jonas Valanciunas, all the players that have come into these doors and left. Those players are good in their own rights, but playing up pace and playing up tempo and constantly running did not suit what they do best. And now you have a roster that credit to Joe Dumars, when he sat down after his first interview about taking the Pelicans job, was the first thing he said. He said, look, we may not win every game, we may not win the championship, but we want to put something on the floor that's entertaining and that's up pace that the people can buy into and surround. And Garrett, I think that's the brand of basketball that they're about to play. Just from a couple clips. And again, some of that'll get ironed out. Jordan Poole dropped a few air balls. Jeremiah Fear still can't hit a 3, but there were elements of it where you're like, this is what basketball is supposed to look like. This is how it's supposed to be fluid from that perspective. Now, outside of that, you know what else felt natural? The relationship with the best player and the second best player. The first 2 points of the season came Zion to Trey Murphy. The next 3 points of the season, Zion and Trey Murphy. And you were the whole time, you just alluded to it. You're talking about Brandon Ingram and Zion having moments where they both look like they could be the best player on the court. But how many games, I know we can go back to that one Minnesota game where Brandon Ingram and Zion looked unstoppable, but outside of that game and a couple others, there's not a whole lot of games where you felt like Zion was playing his best and BI was playing his best, and they were playing in concert together. Just in the simple clip, and I go into this is an NBL versus NBA game playing in Australia at 30 in the morning. All you sickos like ourselves that woke up to watch this, it's not the same. I get that. But when it feels natural that your best player is just playing his game and then your second best player is naturally just playing his game, it just feels more fluid. It feels like this is just what it's supposed to be. And so those things really stood out to me. What you got?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but even like outside of the court, there were times even like we would be sitting at games. I'm like, I understand that like you don't have to be best friends and besties. Right. I understand that. You do not. But to say that both of y'all went to the same college, played for the same legendary coach, which is a small fraternity of you are Coach K's best player at Duke. Right. And not that far apart. And now y'all on the same team, and like y'all like barely sit by each other. You know, they don't do the post games after with each other a lot. And again, they're not on the court a lot. But like Zion and Trey just seemed like they naturally click, right? And again, that you don't have to be best friends with the person on the floor to be great together. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to like be cordial and nice and friendly with the guy that like you're carrying the franchise with. And so to your point, to see them in concert play so well together on the court, and then to kind of see them outside of the court be so like tight with each other. I think that in of itself is a positive sign for the Pelicans. Continue with your point.
I couldn't agree more. The other part to that is, yes, I agree. I think Saddiq Bey is going to be one of, if not the most undercover acquisitions of this season. I think by the end of this season, the Pelicans are going to talk about, okay, do we need to start making room for Saddiq Bey so that one of these other because again, he fits. No one on this team is over than 29, so everyone's kind of on the same timeline. He fits what this team needs, and you saw it in elements. And again, natural. It felt natural.
I'm telling you, Jordan Hawkins needs to have a great season this year.
I couldn't agree more. He hit his first three. He looked more confident and things like that. So you saw kind of what you saw from the role players. The other part is, I don't think you're going to have to worry about people attacking the rim when Zion's not on the court. Like, Jeremiah Fears, again, hasn't been able to hit a jump shot since he left Oklahoma. But every time he gets the ball, this is the youngest guy on the court, no matter what country he's in. And every time he's at the rim, going to the free throw line now, he's got to make better decisions. And you saw him settle in that second game. And again, the more you fail, the more he's going to be able to get back. And you saw him at the gym. As soon as they landed in Australia, he was right back at the gym. So that guy puts in the work. But again, you see him attacking the rim. I keep hearing all these podcasts, and I keep hearing from people I trust that are very analytical, not just saying the remarks on first take to get clicks, but people who actually watch the game and comment, and they talk about the Jordan Poole trade for CJ McCollum and not making any sense because CJ McCollum's just as good of a player or whatever. I just don't agree. I think Jordan Poole, like, even though he hit an air ball and things like that, like, again, you saw him getting to the rim and it was like effortlessly. It wasn't a floater from 18 feet. It wasn't craft. Like, he's getting to the rim. CJ McCollum finished at the rim at 53% last season. Jordan Poole was at 68. So damn near 2 out of 3 times he's either going to score or he's going to the free throw line and he's going to make them, Gary. CJ McCollum wasn't a good free throw shooter and Jordan Poole went 8-8 from the line. And so, like, I just think that is a trade that is a plus in the Pelicans side of it that is not being taken into account at all.
Yeah, I 1,000%. And then when you think about it, and the reasons why people say that the Jordan Poole trade was so bad is, well, not only did you trade for a similar player, which you just alluded to, is not really the case. You also added a year on of a contract. And my question is, well, dang, New Orleans won't be able to sign Giannis next year. Like, who else were you going to be saving that money for? Was Luka deciding to come to New Orleans? Because they're all signed now anyway it goes. So in that sense, and to your point about the free throw line, listen, Jordan, at the halftime of the last game, the Pelicans shot like 22 free throws. 12 of them or 14 of them came from Saddiq Bey and Jordan Poole. None of those players are Zion Williamson. Mm-hmm. And so if you have got other guys who are going to draw fouls and get to the free throw line, and then you also have to guard Zion as well, like that should get you into the bonus a lot quicker. And now when you replace a CJ McCollum with a Jordan Poole, who is looks like a substantially better free throw shooter from just these small, small clips, this small time on the floor, like that in of itself is an upgrade, right? And Jordan Poole is younger, he's faster, he's got more spry in his step, and you want to play up and down. I'm with you. I don't understand how that Jordan Poole trade is such a negative on the Pelican side. But again, trades don't get on the floor, picks don't get on the floor. What happens when you roll the ball out? You saw what happened.
Right. So I got to get to Zion. Again, the physique is great. Everyone looks at the stats. She's like, oh, the first game he went crazy in the first half. Second game he had 3 steals, 2 blocks, 9 rebounds, things like that. Again, the thing that excites me the most this season about Zion is, yes, I hope he stays healthy, just because it'd be better for this franchise and everything that's tied to it, better for everyone involved. But his ability on the defense, I've said this since he's a rookie, and you can quote me on this. Like, he has all the tools possible to be a impactful defender, not average, not good, but impactful defender. And like, you're starting to see it click for him. Like, every game, you're starting to see him read the offense, whether it's an inverse NBL, NBA, whatever, LeBron and Fold, like, it doesn't matter what it is, right? He's starting to read the floor on defense, and to your point, be a shot to turn, but also one of those guys that you can't just dribble by with the ball loose, or he's going the other way, or his teammates going the other way with it. And you talk about kind of that hunter mentality of Zion and Herb, and now Zion and Sadiq Bey. Well, if he's able to kind of bring that action on the and that activity on the defensive end, and it feeds into everybody else around him. I see Jaleel kind of talking about it. I see some of the other people worried about the defense. I actually think if you look at the Pelicans roster and the athletes that they have, if Zion and Herb and Trey are leading the charge on the defensive end, you're going to be able to mix and match. You talk about Micah Peavy. You talk about Sadiq Bey. You talk about some of these other bigger body wings that are going to be able to press up on these guards. Well, if everyone's playing that high activity, high in-your-face defense the entire game, I think that suits the Pelicans well. I think, again, the bigger teams that have the 7-footers, that's where the Pelicans is going to struggle, because their 7-footers are young and inexperienced outside of Kevon Looney. But I think the teams that are more perimeter oriented are going to be where the Pelicans shine. If you look at the top of the West with the Thunder and the Rockets, guys that can get in your face and can defend, and everyone's really high on Portland and Denny Avdi and things like that, guys that can defend. I actually think that like the Pelicans are going to get some of that out of their guards, out of their wings, just by pure athleticism and want to. You starting to see that click from that end. What were your takeaways just from the defense? Because that's going to be the area that makes or breaks this team.
Well, you talk about, wings and guys getting into spaces. You know who else fits that mold? DeJounte Murray when he gets back. So you're just going to be adding on to more defensive wing-minded athletes and things like that. Listen, the Pelicans have all the tools to be great on the perimeter defensively. It's going to be about consistency, and it's going to be about committing to that, right? And no coach over the past whatever years, maybe outside of Daigneault, has required more defense from their team than Willie Green. And so I don't think
Ime Udoka. Well,
Ime Udoka.
Reed Shepard couldn't touch the court last year.
Yeah, Ime Udoka. I think Willie Green is up there, right? I have many guys. He's up there. He will not let you get on the court if you don't play defense. And so I think that's not going to be an issue, because Willie Green is not going to allow it to be an issue, and that goes to somebody else I want to talk about when you talk about the defensive side and everything. I want to give a shout out to Jose Alvarado, and the reason why is obviously he's the spark plug, and he's the guy you bring in and hounds the defenses, but quiet is kept. Jose has like really morphed himself into a leader of this team. And it's not all about the best players being, the vocal leaders of the team, because sometimes that's just not who they are, right? Shea is not a loud, outspoken guy. Like Jokic is not a loud, outspoken guy. And sometimes you got to have somebody else to kind of step in and do that. And I think what you're seeing from Jose, again, a guy who is really honestly looking at his replacement in Jeremiah Fears, he could be, to himself and focusing on keeping his job. But you see it in the clips at practice when he's talking directly to Zion. And you see that he's the guy that's at the front of the line for the daps, and everybody's walking through the lineups, and he's got his separate dap with everybody. You hear him talking on the bench and communicating to everybody. And then when he gets on the floor, that he keeps that same energy, picking up the pace, picking up people full court if it needs to be that. He's gotten better at the jump shot. And I think that he is a very underappreciated backup point guard. And just seeing him kind of step into this leadership role as Brandon Ingram has exited, and as CJ McCollum has exited, and Jonas Valanciunas has exited, and Larry Nance is next. You've lost a lot of leadership in that locker room. And it's time, obviously, for Zion and Trey and Herb to step up. You got guys like Looney coming in and Sadiq Bey, like Jordan Poole, like other guys coming in. But Jose is like a homegrown guy. Like, he's with Zion and Trey and Herb as a guy that kind of stepped in as this is part. They've been here for the whole of it. So to see him kind of come out and maintain that mentality and still pick up the level of intensity that you need for the game, I just think he deserves a big shout out for that. And I'm interested to see how he deals with the Jeremiah Fears and the playing time of it. But one thing you can bet from Jose is that he's going to bring that intensity and those things. And so I just want it is noticeable how he's been out. But as far you just have a lot of options to play both offensively and defensively. Not a lot of guys who are one way. Like we saw Jordan Hawkins get pushed around a little bit, by some guys. But even he will get shot blocks, right? Like he'll get chased down blocks.
I think he's becoming a serviceable defender. Like to your point, his rookie year was kind of bad. Like he was just getting punished over and over and over. But to your point, he makes up for it. He's a good rebounder for his size. To your point, he's able to get shot blocks. He has high activity as well because he's an athlete, even though he's a shooter too. And if that's your worst defender, again, like Tyrese Halliburton is not a great defender, but when you put him in a defensive system where everyone is hounding and playing aggressive, he looks like a much better defense. I see it in the comments. Like Herb Doe's defense is infectious. I believe that as well. If Herb and Zion are flying around the court, it doesn't take you to be Tony Allen at Jordan Poole. Like Trey Murphy, you don't have to be Dennis Rodman, like on the other end. And Eves, right? Like you have other people supplanting some of those defensive mainstays in your lineup. And I think, again, if there's anything that Willie Green has been a proponent about, it has been defense. And so this is his shot to say, hey, all these guys are scorers. How are you going to make them play defense the way you got BI to, the way you got Zion to, things like that? I think all of that is intertwined from that standpoint. So that leads us into our last question. Like, what else are you looking for the preseason? I don't know about you. The Pelicans have like 10 days because they just got back, got a little rest. They have like 10 days for the next preseason game versus the Rockets in Houston. I'm kind of really looking forward to that game. Even though it's a preseason game, I feel like the Rockets are going to start warming up to get back into rhythm and things like that and start playing guys. But I'm like really interested because I think the Pelicans are going to look at it like, hey, that's the team that everyone says is supposed to be, the 2 seed, the 3 seed and things like that. Let's go to Houston. And, I think it's going to be a little bit more intense than your typical preseason game. What are some of the other things you're looking just grasp as we get closer to the regular season?
Yeah. I mean, Ime Udoka team only knows how to play one way, and so right. I think you're on to something. I think there is going to be some. What up, West Bank Rick? I think there's going to be some tough basketball being played. I think the first thing I want to see is, we talk about some of the things that might get in the way of this team, and somewhere on the list is Willie Green's coaching. Somewhere on the list, right? Depending on where you are. And I think the first,
I know where you're going with this.
That was starting Kevon Looney over Yves Missi. And listen, I for one did not think that Kevon Looney was coming to the Pelicans to play starting to be a starter.
You also didn't think that about Daniel Tice, but go ahead.
That's true. I'm not sure Kevon Looney thought he was coming to the Pelicans to play starting. And I'm more than sure Yves Missi, who played the most games last season, was the most healthy out of most of the Pelicans last season, if not all of them, really didn't do anything to like get his job taken away from him, and then made second team all rookie. I'm not sure how he is going to feel if this is a thing. So I don't know if this was more of a, hey, Kevon, look, we're in Melbourne. Why don't you, Jordan Poole is starting. This isn't like it isn't even a real preseason game, to be honest with you. Let's go ahead and get you some run with the ones, because we know what we got from Eves. Or if this is like something Willie Green is like, we all talk about Willie Green has his guys. It was Garrett Temple. It was Devontae Graham. It was Tony Snell. We've seen it throughout the years where you've been like, oh, Daniel Tice, are you sure? Like this is the guy that should be starting? And so that's going to be my first question is, what's this situation with Eves and Kevon Looney starting? Because you don't want to lose your young center who started for you last season, lose that confidence that we just talked about he needs so much of. And then he's worked so hard on his game, talked about how hard he's worked on his game. And then he come back and he's lost his spot. I'm just interested to see that. And then my next thing.
Before you move on to that, now here's me playing devil's advocate here. You and I both coach, obviously not at the NBA level, youth sports. I think there's something to, because again, I always ask for both sides to be fair. If you're going to knock him for those situations, you also have to applaud him for getting Trey to buy into the defensive end and making Trey play defense before he got back on the court. I'll give him some on that. I think this is a little bit of coachmanship. I'm going to call it that. Kevon knows what to do. You can see it on the court. You can see him.
Oh, absolutely.
You can see his IQ play out on the court. And we would rather that with the starting lineup, who we just talked about is so athletic that we just need someone to get rebounds and to be smart on the court, so that the next group that might not be as athletic, the Jeremiah Fears of the war, the Jordan Hawk, the younger guys, you have a rim protector behind you. Here's the only, not the only. Here's one of the questions I have with that type line of thinking. Well, we just saw it kind of play out. And again, this is a preseason game, and Willie Green was asked afterwards, what was the thought process behind the Kevon Looney? He said, we like what he brings, the toughness, the rebounding. We get that. But then, what happens to Carlo Makovich? And then what happens to the pick that you just traded next year in Derek Green when he gets healthy? What does that look like? And I know, again, it's by his own volition. He's injured, so the coach can only play what's in front of him. But you're going to have to figure out this big lineup one way or the other, because even my 7-year-old son turned on the game. He was not allowed to wake up at 4:30 because his ass would have been late for school. I'm like, but we watched it later together for the second time. And he was like, well, Dad, there's no more rim protection on the court. The whole reason behind drafting Yves Missi was so that you had someone back there. And the whole reason you want to play a player like Yves Missi, because you want to be able to switch 1 through 5 and feel comfortable at times leaving your 5 on the island because you think he's athletic enough to at least force a bad shot. I don't think you're switching 1 through 5 with Kevon Looney. And so that becomes an issue. And then it becomes what happens to Carlo, who we've talked about, we think could play a good role on this team because his skill set is different from Yves. He's still really athletic. He still can block shots. He still can catch lobs, but he's more skill oriented than he is just pure rim runner in that degree. And so if he's like the third center, how many minutes is he getting a night, and how does that fit from that? So I'm with you in that. I'm interested to see how the remaining preseasons play out before we get to the regular season, to see if that was more of an admiration, a trial thing, or if that's more of the strategy moving forward. What else you got?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the next thing that I'm going to be looking for, especially starting in this Rockets game, again, the ball movement was great. Hawk was stepping into shots comfortably. Some of the guys were playing very loose, very comfortable. It's going to be a lot different when you're on the floor with Tyree Eason, Amin Thompson, Jabari Smith, Sengun. Is that ball movement mentality? Is that up pace mentality? Can you continue that once the competition steps up? That goes for Jordan Hawkins. Like we saw a lot, his confidence be high and be really low for a good time, span time, and it get going again. When the NBA competition steps up, where does your confidence go? When that physicality steps up, where does your confidence go? Where does that shot go? Do you still have that same confidence when you were playing in Melbourne against NBL competition? And that goes for the entire team. I think, I want to see that same level of confidence. A lot of times you walk into some of these teams and the best teams, like you walk into Minnesota, you in for a dogfight each and every night. You walk into OKC, you in for a dogfight each and every night. You walk into Denver, you might not be in for a dogfight, but you got to deal with that ball movement and Nikola Jovic every single night. There's a blueprint. There's a formula that teams stand by in every single game, in and out. Is that going to be something that you have to deal with, right? The Pelicans have an opportunity to build that on both sides of the ball, but it starts with consistency, and it starts in the preseason with these guys. Like you got to get going. You can't just flip a switch. You need to get the engine running and the engine revving before you take off for the regular season. And so I want to see, can these guys keep that same energy, right? Like if it's beef or something. And then last but not least, can I see Herb Jones on the floor? That's all. Yeah. Can I see Herb Jones on the floor? Yeah. And I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see Herb out there with the starters because I agree with the comments. I think, and I said it on this pod out into the open, I think Herb is just as big of an impact on the Pelicans defense as Zion is on the offense. That sounds like a crazy thing to say for someone we just talked about being a top 10 talent but I think Herb Jones is a special type of defender that doesn't come around very often by the way that he plays. And so I would like to see him with this group as well. The last thing I want to see in these last couple games, I just want to see the leash that Willie Green has with Micah Peavy and Jeremiah Fear. Jeremiah Fear had the longest leash in the first game until everybody saw it. Even the Australian game announcers were like, wow, Jeremiah Fear, he's confident, right? After brick after brick after brick. In the second game, again, he calmed down a little bit. I want to see how much of a leash he had. You bring up a really good point about Jose, and we talked about it last season. Jose is no longer just a gadget energy guy. He is a legit role player who can play backup point guard, who can catch a shoot, who is a player, a rotational player on pretty a lot of teams from that standpoint. So I'm interested to see, like, to start out the season, if Jeremiah Fears goes out bricking a bunch of shots, does Willie pull him very quickly, or does he never get that shot in the first place? So, like, I'm interested to see, like, how much failing are the young players going to be allowed to do? I think Micah Peavy, again, he's not that young. He's like a year younger than Trey and Zion, even though he's a rookie and things like that. And he plays that way. You can see him on the court. He plays with a more mature mindset. Obviously, he still has rookie mistakes and things like that, but you can say he's a little advanced. And I think Darren Queen is of that same ilk. I think his IQ is higher than a lot of players that have been in the NBA for a couple of years already. And I'm interested to see how he gets thrown in the mix as he gets healthier as well. So it'll be a conundrum for Willie Green. And I'm interested to see it play out, especially with the first coming weeks. Like, you got a lot of players that are going to be injured on your schedule to start, and you got to take advantage of it out the gate. So you need to get, to your point, ramped up in the preseason. Use it how it was intended to be used. You can't just sit guys and try to put them in bubble wrap, because that hasn't worked in the past either. I'm excited to see what it looks like moving forward. So with that being said, that's all we have for you this pod. Pelicans are back from Australia. They're still not playing another game in the Smoothie King Center until opening night versus the Spurs and Wemby and things like that. But what you got left for the people, Garrick, as we're finally back into the swing of things?
Yeah, as always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. Yeah, man, they have the back-to-basketball event Friday. I'm sure that's going to draw a lot of fans out. I'm sure, that's going to be very, exciting to see those guys back in the Smoothie King Center in front of the home crowd after representing the city so well. So it's gonna be a good time. Yeah, man. The preseason is here. It is a time for the Pelicans to use this opportunity to hit the ground running. You mentioned the injuries that other teams are facing. it's a lot going on. The Grizzlies got a lot going on. The Spurs and De'Aaron Fox got a lot going on. There's just a lot going on already before the season starts. But the Pelicans, again, outside of Derek Queen, are just going through their preseason, and you wish for good health getting into the preseason. I think that's the most important thing. But you want to use this time to get ramped up and going, because you need to start this season off a lot better than you started off previous season. And there's really, knock on wood right now, not beat on wood. There's no particular reason not to start out well. So, as always, follow myself, Garrett_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO_basketball, no E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your socials. Most importantly, subscribe to New Orleans.basketball, and we'll see y'all in the next one.